Hi, everybody. It's so good to be live with you here on the Spirit Drivers videocast. We're here with Filippo di Lenardo, and we're so excited to be speaking with him today about the 4 pillars of well-being. And thank you also for being here, Greg.
My pleasure. It's great to see you all.
Yeah. So Spirit Drivers Videocast is a place where we're bringing you spirit-driven and vision-led leaders who not only lead their lives and their businesses with vision and spirit, but also help others do the same. And of course, Spirit Drivers is our 4-month mastermind program where you come together with spirit-led visionary people like yourself. So without further ado, let's introduce and get into the good stuff. We're going to be talking about the 4 pillars of well-being today, and we are hoping that this video cast brings you a sense of hope and a sense of really tangible things that you can apply in your life to feel a sense of meaning and purpose in your work and life. Anything else to add before I introduce you, Filippo, from you or Greg?
No, I love the way you present, so that's a bonus right there.
Great.
I'll just like to say to the audience, this is a really great presentation. We've rehearsed it with Filippo before, and you will want to sit through it and take notes and go back and review, and because these are things that you will help you tremendously and that you'll appreciate for a while. So with that said, welcome, Filippo. Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah.
No, thank you. It's a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So I'll just talk a little bit about you before we get into the good stuff. So Filippo is a passionate entrepreneur, and he has relentless aspiration to understand what makes people tick. He's the co-founder with his wife, Marilena, of Essentia, which is a smart day planner inspired by the science of well-being, and it helps busy people manage their day with more balance, focus, and purpose, which who does not want more balance, focus, and purpose? He has a background in hospitality and combines that with his profound interest in behavioral science, neuroscience, psychology, and human-computer interface. And that's inspired his efforts in developing technologies that provide experiences for good. He's a believer that technology, if used consciously, can have the power to accelerate our evolution and flourishing as human beings. Amazing. And that's exactly what the mission of Essentia is, creating a platform aimed at collectively expanding our consciousness and sense of purpose. He's fascinated by the present and future of humankind and has recently created the Agents of Change series, where he gives voice to forward-thinking professionals who are working towards making a positive impact on society. So that's his own video cast, and I've checked out a few of your episodes, and they're really good. He loves storytelling, and he also does workshops and trainings to help organizations and entrepreneurs operate at their best for greater productivity, well-being, and life fulfillment, which is exactly what we're talking about today. So thank you for being here, Filippo.
No, it was a great pleasure. You've made such a wonderful introduction. Now the pressure is on.
Well, I don't think it'll be any problem for you because you're an expert at this stuff. So what we're going to do is Filippo's going to give you 3 tips. He's going to talk about the first 3 pillars of well-being, along with a tangible way that you can apply that pillar in your life. And then he's going to give us a gift, a little surprise for you, and then he'll finish it off with the 4th tip. So you're going to want to watch all the way through to know all 4 tips. Yeah. So Filippo, somebody who is feeling like they want more meaning and purpose in their work and life, what's the first tip for that person?
Well, the easy answer would be look within and not outside. And I think that's one of the biggest problems or challenges we face today as individuals and as society. You know, we live in a world of noise, and it's so easy to get lost in what we should be doing, what others do. And I think a wonderful opportunity is actually to look within, of realizing what's truly important to us, what's really meaningful to us. And I think that the first tip here would be to look at, what intrinsically motivates us. Because, motivation is ultimately what inspires us to act. But when we actually look at motivation, there's 2 types of motivation that can bring about very different results. So we have extrinsic motivation, which is driven by, as the name suggests, external rewards, such as, getting paid for, doing work or getting a perk. And while that's of course good, we all need a bit of that. The problem with extrinsic motivation is that you're driven by something that you can't control the size of it. And so what ends up happening is sometimes you can get in a position of dependency, right? So it could be a bit disempowering. Now, on the other hand, the tip is focus on intrinsic motivation. Intrinsic motivation is that natural motivation you have within, where when no external reward is needed to drive you. So I think one of the simple ways to do that is, think about what you do in your daily life, or generally, what are the things that you do because, no one needs to reward you, that you would do for free? Like in a world where you didn't need to get paid, what is that one thing that when you do, it actually energizes you? And it could be anything, whether it's cuddling your dog, taking care of a pet, whether it's, speaking to someone. There is no right or wrong, but it's truly connecting with what it is that really intrinsically motivates you. And then the next step, I would say, is to ask yourself why. Because, if you dig deeper, it's probably going to get into a very significant reason, whether that's a value that you're connected with. And once you get to the root cause of that can really be the amplifier, because that's almost like a currency that you can apply in different scenarios of your life. But it's really trying to get to that spark. I think for me personally, that's the most important thing, because when we're intrinsically motivated, we are inspired by our deepest purpose.
Beautifully said. Thank you for sharing that. I am such a believer, and this is actually what Spirit Drivers is all about, is being driven by that big purpose, that big why, that what your spirit calls you to do. And when you live that way, it's everything flows. Everything seems to flow when you're connected to that sense of purpose and drive from within.
Absolutely. And you smile more often, and you're more likable, and it's a whole different life when you can connect with that. It's a great suggestion.
Absolutely. The other thing, if we look at it from the 4 pillars of well-being, it touches so many things. But when we have purpose, actually, there is interesting, because there's a science of the purpose of life, which is a relatively new field, but studies show that when we have purpose in what we do, we are, it just psychologically and mentally, we just feel better. And actually, we always talk about happiness, and that's of course important, but happiness is temporary, whereas purpose is eternal. And so it's actually, it makes us live longer, because when we're intrinsically motivated and have purpose in what we do, that feeling of connection, what we do, helps us become, more resilient. So even in challenging times like the ones that we're currently living, one of the 4 pillars of well-being is resilience. So when you're intrinsically motivated, you're naturally more resilient, because you're truly connected to what you stand for. And one of the other tips that maybe it can help people find purpose, when they do find something that really motivates them, that energizes them, is to ask why, but maybe not just once, but maybe multiple times. There is this mental model called the 5 whys, which was a technique used by Toyota to help them figure out what the root cause of their problem was in their production line. And so by asking yourself why for every answer you give, you're forcing yourself to dig deeper so that you can get to the root cause. And so I find that to be an incredibly powerful tip or technique to really get to the root cause of why you're intrinsically motivated, what gives you purpose. Because once you have that, that's like a golden nugget that you can use for the rest of your life.
Okay, so let me make sure I understand. So the how here is, first you identify what it is that gives you energy in your life, what activities, even if it's something simple like petting your dog.
Absolutely.
And then you ask yourself, why does that give me energy? Why is that important to me?
Exactly.
And you ask yourself why 5 times.
The idea is you can do it 5, maybe you do it 3 or 2, but it forces you to get to the root cause. And so that unlocks something that maybe it's a need for connection, or a need for love, or a need, a value. And so as a result, when you get to that root cause, you can always use that as a form of bringing more purpose in your day. If you know that the value of connection is incredibly important for you, then even this call could represent, the streaming could represent a wonderful opportunity for me to connect with you guys, because I'm now driven by my value. And when I take the time to connect with that, then my life becomes abundant. And that's ultimately the way in which we can move and kind of expand our lives, in my view, at least.
Wow. I love that, because you might be doing the same actions during your day, but you can do the action without that connection to your value or your why behind it, or you can do the action with that connection. And the same action then has a different feeling.
Completely.
That's fantastic. Thank you for sharing that tip.
That is a great trick, Filippo. I've not heard that before. Had you, Elise, the 5 whys?
Mm-mm.
That's worth the whole hour and 15 minutes here. This is awesome.
Yeah. Cool. So what's the second pillar, Filippo?
So we talked about resilience, which obviously is very important, as given the time. The other one is self-awareness, right? So being aware of our own thoughts, emotions, feelings, actions, and it's such an important aspect, to really understand who we are. And self-awareness is particularly important because it allows us, when we develop it, to create a space between ourselves and the events that we're experiencing, so that we don't get trapped by negative emotions. Because the problem with our brain is that our brain doesn't really decide for us what's good or bad for it. It only reinforces the thoughts that we feed it. So if we're not able to create distance between ourselves and what happens to us, and we fall into the negative trap, then that creates a vicious circle, which actually ultimately drains lots of energy and doesn't help you live fully. So self-awareness is important, because obviously it makes us aware of who we are, but it also helps us interact with the world from a more balanced perspective. And so when we are self-aware, we can make better decisions, because we're not acting from a place of irrationality. We can build more meaningful connections, because as we are aware of our states and we can create a space inside us, we can now create more space and be aware for others, and be more empathetic. And it's just a wonderful way to understand how to operate at our best, generally in our daily life. So it's a fundamental condition, really, to thrive. And there's always so many things to learn about ourselves. It's definitely not a sprint and something you learn overnight, but it's a journey. And I think that's the beauty about self-awareness.
What that really says to me is about being the observer, practicing being the observer of yourself, of your thoughts. And that observer state is a neutral, non-judgmental state. And the more you practice being there, I practice being there, for example, through meditation. And the more I meditate, then the more I'm able to then have moments of being awoken to that observer self once again during my day. And I do notice that when you're in that state of being the observer, there is that space that you just talked about, that space between stimulus and response, where you get to choose the response instead of having the reaction that might be programmed or something that hasn't been working for you.
Absolutely. It's exactly moving from that state from, like you said, from reaction to interaction. And the observer is whatever is that little good guy on your shoulder that can make you aware. So it's important. Even, imagine when you're, fired up, when you're dealing with a conflict, or whether it's, with a colleague or a family. It's just so important, whether it's in life or in business, to be more aware of your own state and the ones, of others. It's a great way to build empathy too.
Fantastic. So the first pillar of well-being is resilience. Is that right?
Well, I mean, they kind of mix, but I would actually say that the first one would be self-awareness, just because it's such a fundamental condition, to be aware of who we are, because I would say that's the starting point to build anything.
Okay. So you talked about going within as the first tip, and then about self-awareness being the observer, but that's all within the first pillar.
Yes.
Of self-awareness. Yes. Okay. Got it.
Absolutely. Got it. I would say good ways also to practice self-awareness, 2 simple ways. One is self-observation. Mm-hmm. So, kind of observing yourself when you're carrying out your most important activities in the day. what state are you in? What's going through your head? What's going in your heart? Like, where are you? And so that is, it takes practice, but it's kind of bringing that meditative state while you're carrying things, so you can really observe yourself. And an alternative otherwise could be, self-reflection. So just simply at the end of the day, what worked and what didn't, without really much self-judgment, but looking at the next day as a great opportunity for betterment, but in a meaningful way. So those are great ways to just practice self-awareness, in my opinion.
And I want to add here that Essentia helps you do this, right? It's the tool, the planner tool that you've created that has that embedded into it. So you're not only using it as a planner and a calendar manager, but it actually prompts you to be self-aware. It asks you questions that bring up a sense of self-awareness in how you're feeling in your tasks, and also helps you reflect on the tasks and what went well and what didn't go well, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things, obviously I was journaling quite a lot, still do. The problem was that I journal, and then I wish that those thoughts came into the flow of my day when I most needed them. So we said, well, why don't we allow people to quickly reflect? And then based on that information, our system learns. So the next time you have a similar activity that you've identified that you wanted to do something better based on your reflection, it actually, provides it to you just before it. So you can actually put those reflections into work, so that you become your own feedback loop and actually make it happen. So yeah, absolutely. That's a very important element.
Got it. Great. Well,
that's not artificial intelligence. That's real intelligence, Filippo. Congratulations on building this tool. It is fantastic.
Yeah, I think it's important to have also a healthier relationship with technology. So part of our self-awareness is, how are we connecting with the tools and the products that we work, digitally and non. So I think it's such a wide topic that it can cover so many things. But if we could just become a bit more self-aware every day, it's something that unfortunately we haven't really been taught at school. So I think for some people it may be new, for others not, but I think it's an incredibly powerful journey to go into.
Oops.
I'm having a little connection. There we go. We're all back. Great. So, I agree. We could talk about self-awareness for the whole hour, but I want to know the second pillar of well-being. This one after self-awareness.
Yeah, absolutely. So the second pillar is outlook, which simply refers to the way we look at life, which is so powerful. I think if we take the example of what's happening in the world right now, I think one of the moods that would best describe it is probably the word uncertainty. And I'm using this example because it's sort of interesting to see how outlook can be a powerful antidote to what's currently happening. So, of course, uncertainty is for a lot of us is linked with a negative feeling and with a pain, the mental and emotional pain of not knowing what the future holds. And this essentially is a fear. Right? The fear of not knowing. And the problem with fear, the interesting thing with fear, first of all, is that we only experience it when we think about the future. So it's a very future-led, specifically when we think it will have more negatives than positives. The problem is when we act from a place of fear, our self-worth, our reality literally shrinks. And that could lead to a lot of stress. And actually, it's bad for us. And science showing that even a part of our brain can actually shrink by almost 14%, which is related to memory. So stress is definitely something, it's something that we can work towards. And one of the best ways to deal with fear and stress is outlook, which, as I was saying, basically refers to the way we choose to look at life. So, we could be looking right now what's happening in the world as a terrible event. And while, okay, to a certain degree that may be true, we can also look at it as an opportunity to reconnect with ourselves and understand what this event can teach us. And so now we're flipping the coin, we're looking at it as an opportunity. And so it depends on how we look at our life. And there is a book that actually is very interesting that is called it's called Mindset. And this psychologist, Carol Dweck, talks about these two different mindsets. So when you are in a fixed mindset, you basically look at things as non-changeable. Everything is set in stone. You can't change. Events can change. And so what ends up doing is you take up, feedback very personal. You don't venture into new territories, and you're basically stuck in your own being. And then on the other hand, there is growth mindset, which is someone that looks at any event as an opportunity for learning and improvement. So it completely changes the relationship, right? It's not about, oh, this didn't go well, I'm terrible, but like, oh, this didn't go well, great. How can I learn? How can I move forward? What can this event teach me? So it's a completely different mindset. And so when we train, because ultimately it is a training, and that's the good thing about well-being, that it's a skill, we can train our brain to, and it obviously is not the easiest thing, but with practice, it can really come into play. And it's like, there is a quote by Nelson Mandela that says, "I never lose. I either win or learn." And that, I try to apply that as much as I can in my day, but it's so liberating, right?
Yes.
Because it takes away a lot of self-judgment and pressure.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And so how would you have somebody, what's your tip for applying this and having a growth mindset and changing that outlook on difficult circumstances or challenges?
Yeah, for sure. So I think it's a term that is in science is called reappraisal, and it's basically flipping the coin. So let's say you have an important call coming up for a presentation and you're stressed. Subconsciously you're probably giving more weight to what's negative. And so a way to rebalance yourself is to maybe ask yourself powerful questions like, how will this event enrich me no matter its outcome? How will it make me better? What is the opportunity here to learn? How can I approach that scenario from a either win or learn? So rather than focusing on the negatives, not necessarily focusing only on the positive, but understanding how this event can be a point towards my journey of evolution, so that even if it doesn't go well, I am still learning, I'm still winning. And what will I actually be able to learn, so that I can kind of really change my relationship with the activity at hand, sort of balance myself out.
Beautifully said. I love how I'm seeing this cycle between self-awareness and outlook. So as you develop your outlook, you're also developing your self-awareness, right? You're asking yourself these questions. You are reprogramming, you're consciously practicing a new relationship to challenging events.
Absolutely.
Fantastic. Okay. Greg, you have a question about this one?
Oh, I love this. It's another way of, I give people advice on both hiring and selecting partners in terms of entrepreneurs or business partners and leaders to work for. And that is that the first thing you look for is that, can they see the future, right? If they can't see the future and they don't have a good expression of where they're going, where they're leading you to, or what they want to do, then they're probably not the best in the entrepreneurial category or in the leader category, because they don't have a good outlook. It's not there, right? You're saying that that's a pillar and I believe that just my experience over the years of working with leaders and entrepreneurs is that if they don't have that outlook, where they can see the future and they know where they want to go, not necessarily how they're going to get there, but where they want to go, that outlook is so important. So I believe that is key. I also love the Mandela quote. I'm going to frame that on my wall.
That's what I do. It's like just there, it's so simple, but it's so powerful, right?
Well, isn't that the easiest way to de-stress your life? Just maybe that's a tattoo.
Right here.
Right. Yeah.
Always learning. Yeah.
Yeah, and the other thing is, learning is actually good for your brain health too, because every time you learn something, your brain cells, the structure of your brain actually strengthens. So it's great for building, again, greater resilience, obviously, because you have an outlook, health, creativity, flexibility. So it's really a win-win-win.
Mm-hmm. Fantastic. Thank you. Okay, what's the third pillar of well-being, Filippo?
So the third pillar is what we talked about just before. So it's resilience. And I think, for me, ultimately, resilience is it's a very interesting subject, because you can then develop resilience in different ways. Actually, meditation is a great way to build resilience, because it makes you milder and less subject to events, and so more strong inside. Purpose is obviously one way to build greater resilience. And then I think there is also this concept of, in the way we build resilience by not forcing things as much, but learning to play with the flow of life, which is a very interesting concept of a path to least resistance. So instead of forcing our way in, having some sort of illumination of what we do, but not be so narrow-minded in only forcing our solution, because that can wear us down energy-wise. Whereas it's kind of almost becoming a dancer with life and having our aim, but being flexible of how we get there. And I think that's also a powerful way to build resilience.
We've spoken before about Eastern and Western philosophies on life and on achieving goals. And I liked how you were starting to talk about the flow of life and being open to a force greater than yourself that's also guiding the flow of life, and not thinking of yourself by yourself as a singular disconnected unit, but thinking of yourself as a part of life and as connected to some greater thing that can also influence your path, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that is so powerful. Again, it requires a lot of self-awareness, because you need to be aware when you're pushing or when you're being pulled. But I think that sort of Eastern philosophy of letting life reach you in some ways, it's a wonderful experiment. Sometimes it's almost, yeah, come on, like that's nice. It sounds a bit blah blah, but it's again, it's a journey. I think instinctively it's easier to push our way, and of course, in some ways, that's probably we do it sometimes because sometimes we need to motivate ourselves. But if we can kind of learn also to embrace this other part, it can really bring a lot of lightness and joy in our lives, and ultimately make us more sustainable in our efforts, I would say.
Yeah, find the flow and go with the flow. So for somebody who maybe isn't as familiar with this concept of flow and being connected to more than just themselves, how would you say they apply this pillar?
The general concept of the Eastern philosophy, or would we talk about the pillar of resilience as an example?
Maybe let's go back to the pillar of resilience in general.
Yeah. Well, I think again, one of the ways that I sort of use as a technique is called linking. So that means having a mid, it could be long-term, short-term, or mid-term goal of who would you like to be as a person. So either what you would like to achieve, which can be meaningful enough, or even better, who's the person you want to be? What behaviors would you love to live by in a specific time frame? 1 month, 3 months, 6 months, a year, 5 years, 10 years. And then whenever you're facing maybe a difficult moment, challenging moment, whether that is driven by fear, stress, or even procrastination, ask yourself, how would that best me that I've identified in my vision actually tackle this activity? And so what happens is you can find that motivation within tapping into your best you and linking and seeing how this activity can serve you and being creative. Again, it's a mix of outlook and self-awareness of how can this activity, although stressful and discouraging, represent your best opportunity for your best you to shine, and link it to get you closer to your goal. And you're essentially tapping into your own hero, right? And I find that's a very powerful technique that I use sometimes when I'm doing tasks that may not be the most inspiring ones, or even when the stress levels are really high, or there's some fear there. It's just a very reassuring way of putting things into perspective.
Linking. So linking your vision for who you want to be to the accomplishment of the task at hand, right?
Yes.
Wow, powerful.
That's really powerful.
Yeah.
That's an excellent way to guide people through tough times, actually. Right? Link to the result that you want.
Yeah.
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 Yeah, and back to your vision. And another thing I want to add is about resilience. One of the things that Greg and I have really found about resilience is, or that supports resilience, is a community.
Yes.
And that's what we've seen with spirit drivers, as people start to meet and start to share and start to understand, really see that they're not alone in whatever it is they're going through. Right now, people are so, as we're more cut off from other people, there's a sense of like not understanding why I feel this low grade kind of depression or this kind of sense of like downness. But then once you start to talk about it, start to share it with other people in community, and you just feel understood and seen, you realize that other people are feeling the same way that you are. I find that resilience just skyrockets. People are so much more able to manage their own challenges.
Yeah, and I think it ultimately comes down, and that's one of the things we believe at Essentia is about energy management. And I think energy is whether you look at it from a scientific productivity or spiritual perspective, is really what drives us. And when we're able to connect with others, we're exchanging energy. One of the simple example, one of the things that I find, and it's also one of the hacks that we do at Essentia, is like sometimes when you're low on energy, call someone and share an inspiring idea. And I always find myself surprised. I had such low energy, and then I call someone and I just have an inspiring talk, and I'm like, my whole inner chemistry just changed. So
totally,
I completely agree with you. It's such a wonderful way to re-energize and ultimately be more resilient.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, reaching out and connecting with other people, I find the same. Beautiful. And now we've done the first 3 pillars. The first one is, will you summarize them for us, Filippo?
Yeah, of course. Self-awareness, then we had outlook, and then resilience.
And resilience. Fantastic. And you have a little gift for us, right? You have a little surprise. Can you share that with us?
Yeah, of course. So we are actually launching the second version of Essentia in mid-January. And so we would love to, give a month free to your listeners, as a good deed, to have a great start to 2021, as the goal of Essentia is to help people manage their day, more sustainably, but also achieve their goals more effectively. So I think it could be a good helping hand to have a good start to 2021.
Rock on. So I've just shared the website for Essentia so that you can get your free month of the new platform. And I would highly recommend it. It's a powerful way to cultivate all of the pillars of well-being that Filippo has been talking about here, just in your daily planner tool. So it's an amazing thing. Could also be a good gift for somebody that you love too, to give them a year's subscription to Essentia. So just another thing to think about from Santa's perspective. And Greg and I want to share also that in January, the next cohort of Spirit Drivers is launching. So if you want to be part of a group who is dedicated to living with meaning and purpose, and who is also dedicated to practicing and applying the pillars of well-being in our lives, then we invite you to apply on our website, spiritdrivers.com. All right, Filippo, without further ado, what is the 4th pillar of well-being?
The 4th pillar, well, it connects with what we were saying before, energy, and therefore generosity. And this is really an interesting one because, I always say, who would have thought that I could increase my well-being by giving to others? It's quite ironic, but quite beautiful at the same time. It's a very romantic story, right? And it's interesting because actually, there's a part in our brain that is hardwired for contribution. And so whenever we contribute, our brain releases this trio of chemical called happiness trifecta, which ultimately what it does, it helps us regulate our mood. It helps us feel less stressed, and helps us feel good and more proactive. So it's a great way to also boost our productivity. And yeah, ultimately, there is a study that shows that when you're generous towards someone, the people that look at the generous act are more likely to do the same towards others. And this actually spreads to 3 degrees. So the people that receive after 3 degrees, the act of generosity, you as the initiator of that act won't even meet them. And I say, well, that's when you've made an impact. So it's, I think it's a wonderful thing to embrace it in our lives, to be more generous. And again, it's a win-win because, the more you give, the more you get. in some ways. So I think it's just one of the many laws, I guess, of the universe. And so, yeah, I just find it a wonderful, wonderful way, especially now building up, to the festive season of being generous. I think the important thing of generosity is that it needs to come from a place of love, hopefully not like I need to be generous, because if you do it from that perspective, it will never feel authentic, and ultimately you won't reap the benefits. Your brain, your inner chemistry is actually quite smart in some ways. So if you fake it, I mean, it's better than not being generous, but all I'm saying is to really connect with the act of generosity, almost not expecting back. And that's when you kind of win, because you're really doing it from the bottom of your heart.
Wow. I'm sure that there are so many ways to practice this, but how would you recommend that we practice it this year and going into 2021?
Well, I think, I've been thinking about it. There's different ways. I think, my instinctive answer would be, open your heart and see what happens, because it's just like a step back. But I think if I had to think about it in my daily life, if I'm looking at, any activity that is coming up, whether I'm writing an article, whether I'm having a call, whether I'm doing, anything, admin is like, who could I be serving by doing this? How can I be serving, and what can I do to make sure that I really serve them in the best possible way that is authentic to me? So it's kind of this act of service that is connected with my personality, my being, but then towards others. And that's also, I encourage to try this out, because it's quite interesting. The moment you think that way, you can feel that there is a part inside you that opens up. And it's almost like the pressure goes off in some way, because you're allowing a bigger force coming inside you. And that's, I think, where the powerful way of proactively thinking of how you can be generous in this act. And anyone, there's not one way of doing it. It's just something that needs to be spontaneously coming from your heart, really, I would say.
One theme that I've noticed throughout this whole interview, throughout all the pillars of well-being, is asking yourself questions. And I think with every pillar, you've talked about some question that you can ask yourself. For generosity, the question is, how can I serve? And this is something that I've read about, and also is the power of asking yourself questions. Even if you don't have the answer come into your brain immediately, your brain loves questions. It loves to figure things out. And so if you just continue to gently ask yourself questions throughout your day, you will find answers. And new things will emerge. And it's such a good way to, especially to build up that first pillar of well-being, which is self-awareness, and to shift patterns gently and with the flow of life. So, and another thing about it is, it feels like the questions, well directed, are just activating parts of the best parts of you as a human, and you're not forcing anything, but you're just activating all the well-being, the parts of you that are already well inside.
Yeah, absolutely.
I was going to say, it's almost like these 4 pillars are a roadmap to finding your authentic self. They're really powerful, but everything that you've talked about is about it includes the concept of authenticity, right? Finding a way to be your own generous self, not because you have to be, but because it is good for you and it feels good and it makes you a brighter, more alive person, all the way back to self-awareness, right? So this concept of authenticity, I've been giving that a lot of thought recently, because it's something that we need to guide ourselves and our cohorts and our clients to become. And you've really laid out a beautiful roadmap, Filippo. I'm very impressed with this.
Thank you. No, well, to be honest with you, the two things. First, going back to the questions, I read this quote and it's so true. The quality of our life depends on the quality of the questions we ask ourselves, and I think that's quite powerful. And yeah, the 4 pillars of well-being. It's interesting because I looked at the science of well-being, the neuroscience, and it showed that there were these 4 pillars, and I thought it was quite nice, to bring a subject that can feel quite hard to define, into something that was more practical that everyone can practice. And the good thing is, well-being is a skill that we can all practice, no matter our age, gender, income, race. It's a skill, and like everything, it takes practice. But the more you do it gently, like you, Elise, were saying, in a non-judgmental way, in a gentle way, it's a wonderful way of meaningfully changing our lives, and it's free.
Absolutely. Well, I just want to say again that Essentia is a tool, that's a technology that also really supports you in generating all and practicing all of these pillars. And, it's one way that technology is out there for good and can make you more alive and more human. So I would highly recommend to go check out the website and get a free month of Essentia. And we also have a community of spirit drivers here open for you to join if that's something that feels in alignment with you as well. A community of people who are dedicated to living this way. So with that, I want to thank you both so much for another fantastic interview, another fantastic almost hour together of sharing what it means to be vision-led and spirit-driven. And happy holidays to both of you.
And we want to say the same to you, Elise. It is another great event in our series. We hope everyone's signing up and joining us every Tuesday for all of these live interviews. Filippo, this one has been one of the top. We really appreciate your time, and I think I'm going to sign up for my free month too. So I'm going to try this out. I want your brain in my computer. That's what I want.
Well, that's the goal, right? Long term, that's the goal. I just think
it's one notification I won't turn off.
Yeah. I think technology can be an enabler in so many ways, and so we just need to be mindful of what kind of direction we give it. But no, thank you for having me. It looks like Santa's already in town by looking at your hat, at least. So I think I wish all of your guests and you guys a great end to 2020 and a wonderful start to 2021. I think we all need it, and I think with the right outlook, we can all have a great start to 2021.
Absolutely. This is the perfect time of year to be asking ourselves some great questions and be reflecting and understanding how we can make next year even more awesome. So thank you both again, and thank you all for watching. Until next Tuesday, we will see you there. Ciao.
Take care.